Go.
Well, hello, everybody. We want to welcome you to our panel discussion on the subject or entitled Getting Unconscious with Your Unconscious Bias. My name is Wayne Guzman, and I'm accompanied by Ross Pendergraph. We are co-chairs of the National Association of Health Underwriters Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, as well as local members and of the Los Angeles Health Underwriters Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. We're really honored today that you have joined us, and we're excited to be able to engage in this conversation, important conversation about getting uncomfortable with your unconscious bias. We appreciate the opportunity. And without further ado, I'm going to get it started by introducing or handing it over to our respective panelists and allowing them to introduce themselves and tell a little bit more about their work. So first and foremost, I'm going to start with Aisha. Aisha, would you kindly share a little bit about how it is that you came to do this kind of work, who you are, and why it's important for not only companies, organizations, but individuals within our country to know and care about this subject.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much. So I just want to really start off with a quote by Cesar Chavez, who's a Mexican-American activist. And he said that preservation of one's own culture does not require contempt or disrespect for other cultures. And, you know, I know that this is a diversity council and task force specific to the healthcare network, but I think that sometimes by making it that general, we miss the mark, okay? And this process starts in our everyday lives. So ultimately, we look outside for the change that needs to happen internally first, right? And so I just really wanted to really start with that. Internally, we can't look at anybody else. We can't diversity, inclusion, equity is not something that's an external thing, believe it or not, right? It's actually not something that can be taught, but something that you actually have to invest into. Okay. And so I just wanted to, just really start with that before I got into who I am, because like June, she spoke about a little earlier prior to this meeting, talking about her 3 sons. And I'm a mother. I have 2 sons. But prior to that, I, was a United States Air Force veteran, combat veteran. Okay, and I served honorably. I got out of the United States Air Force in 2010, and I had no idea that I wasn't a face of veteran, right? I had no idea that as a veteran that I was going to have to fight for things that I had already fought for, right? I had to fight for healthcare. Okay, still fighting, by the way. I had to fight for quality education. And I had to fight for my children to have quality education. Can you imagine giving your youth over to a system, over to something that you believed in and you invested all that you were in, and then being denied those same benefits that you actually fought for? And so this what brought me into this work. Specifically, my youngest son was bullied all the way through from 2nd grade to about 5th grade. And, that kind of got me into this activism work, like really just looking at our lives to see, because I was really naive, to be honest with you. I didn't understand, because I know that for me, people were people. I grew up in the South, right? And so racism is cut and dry there. Okay, racism is Black, white, and that's not a good thing, but it's more identifiable. It wasn't until I actually moved to New York, hoping that the mindset would be different, and I was met with an experience that's similar to death by 1,000 cuts. Okay, and what I like to call death by 1,000 cuts is something called microaggressions, right? And so it opened me up to really learn some of the things that I didn't even know were happening to me. I know that they were happening to myself and my children, but I didn't understand what they were, and I couldn't really put a name to them. And so that's what helped me really get into this work, and to help other people just kind of unveil some of their own unconscious biases that they had, not only about them, about other people and other cultures, but also about themselves. And so my name is Aisha Taylor, and I am a small business owner. As I mentioned to you, am a United States Air Force veteran. I also serve on something called the Community Education Council here in NYC. I am a part of District 10, one of the 32 districts. We have over 55 students and 55,000 students in my particular district, predominantly Hispanic or from the Latinx community. And at the city level, we have about 32 districts total, and we serve over 1.1 million students. And so that is why I felt like I had to be a voice to speak for the voiceless, because as you stated, and as we already know, that we're not the face, okay? Unfortunately, in this work, we're the afterthought, right? And when money shifts, right, and when these issues start impacting the income and the revenues and all those big things, that's when people kind of want to, like, highlight and do these initiatives. But we don't need this to be projects. We don't need this work to be, afterthoughts. We need this work to happen in your everyday lives. Like, as I mentioned in a previous conversation, like, how do you treat the janitor? Right? Do you treat the janitor or the custodial worker or any of these people with the same amount of respect that you treat the owner of the store, right? Or the same respect that you treat the CEO, And so it ultimately starts there. And I hope that kind of brings it in for everybody.
Absolutely. And I definitely admire and have, from the moment June and I first spoke to you, we truly admired your passion and are thankful for your service and the perspectives. I'm going to ask LaRon to go next and answer the same question. Tell us about why this is important, who you are, why you got involved, and why is it important, or in any order you choose. Thank you, LaRon.
Well, thank you for that, Wayne. Thank you. Thank you for the input, Aisha. I really enjoyed what you had to say. My name is LaRon Barton. I'm a writer, author, and speaker. I'm from Kansas City, Missouri. I currently live in San Francisco, California, kind of in the backyard of the fires. So, so I mean, we're kind of ducking and dodging that for the past week. I write a lot about race, mass incarceration, politics, tech, business, and dating. The reason for me, the reason why that I write about race so much is as a Black man, that colors my everyday experience. Like there isn't one facet of my life that race does not impact, and because of that, that means that I have to move and groove in a way that may be different than others. I mean, I have to think about race as far as like where I work, where I live, where I go out to socialize, where I travel. Believe just last night, a young Black man by the name of Jacob, and I'm forgetting Jacob Blake. He was just shot by the Kenosha, Wisconsin police, unarmed. So this is my everyday existence. Because of that, and I was blessed by God with the ability to write and to articulate my story as well as the story of other folks that look like myself. I write about the experiences of Black people in America. I think it's important because a lot of times our lives are not given the full picture. So many people rely on stereotypes, unfounded truths, and just overall just lies about what it is to be Black, the circumstances that we face. Why is there an uprising whenever a Black person is shot? Well, and arrest shouldn't turn into murder. So what I've been doing in the corporate sector is I've been giving a lot of talks regarding race in in everyday work environments, as well as explicit and implicit bias. But my work isn't so much of that, but it's a friend of mine. She termed it belonging. So you can have a lot of people at your company that are Black. You can have a lot of people that are Latino, Asian, et cetera, et cetera. But if they don't belong, if they feel that their presence is nothing more than, to quote my friend Neha, last year's window dressing, then that's not really going to solve the issue. That's not going to bring about change. And so I like to talk with companies about how we can go deeper than just the number of representation. Because don't get me wrong, listen, representation is awesome, it's needed, but that's the first yard line, right? You're like, that's the first down. So after we get the first down, the second thing that we should be working towards is that how can we bring an impact that affects us all? Because one thing that I know, and this comes from working in Silicon Valley, you can't be an innovative company if your staff doesn't look innovative. So I'm really excited about this panel. Aisha, you hit the nail right on the head. Look, like I'm from Kansas City, so like you, racism is pretty much black and white. You know where you stand, and me personally, I prefer that. But because it just reminds me of something that Malcolm said about he would rather be in a pit full of southern rattlesnakes that kind of warns them where they are versus a pit of northern garden snakes where you don't know where they are. So I'm rambling, but I'm really juiced to be on this panel, and thank you very much.
I thank you, and I didn't think you're rambling at all, and I actually appreciate the quote and the perspectives, and I'm going to hand it over, or at least ask that same question to our colleague, who we've come to be so endeared to. June Taylor of Kaiser, would you tell us a little bit about who you are and why your passion for this work?
Well, thank you, Wayne. And man, LaRon, Aisha, just loved everything you had to say so far. I'm excited to just have you be a part of this panel. But a little bit about me. First and foremost, I'm a mother. I'm a mother of 3 sons, grown sons now, but they lost their dad as teenagers. So I was a single mom for many years raising my son. So I want to start there because that's part of why I'm here today. Because as an African-American person, you deal with diversity, equity, inclusion all your life. It's just a part of life for us every single day. I am a strategic sales executive for Kaiser Permanente. I'm a part of the equity, inclusion, diversity. I'm an equity, inclusion, diversity champion. I'm also a part of the Kaiser Permanente African American Professional Association. And, I was kind of thrust into the role of LAHU's chair and co-chair of NAHU Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And all of that fell upon the George Floyd incident, and just how we had a happy hour, and we were able to the president, Brian Sullivan, opened it up for conversation, and I began to share a little bit of how I felt with all that happening and how it resonated with me having 3 sons, because this is something, and I know LaRon can attest to it. I mean, every day as an African-American mom, Aisha as well, your thought is that story gonna apply to me one day? Is that gonna happen to one of my sons? Am I gonna get a phone call and my son has been hit? And I tell people all the time, I've been in the industry for over 30 years, and I laugh about it, but literally I have been the only chocolate drop in the room oftentimes. And so when people think of June Taylor, you know, I would always say, you're never going to forget me, because I'm the only chocolate chop in the room. So you got to remember who June Taylor was, because we're like, oh yeah, that Black sister over there, that's who June Taylor is. And so, so with that being said, you know, in this industry, I can talk and speak to all the different challenges that I've had along the way, and I'm blessed to be a part of it. But again, just like LaRon, just like Aisha, we have our stories. And so after that meeting, being asked to be a part of the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Task Force, I'm still in the learning process. I'm still, you know, I'm a voice to the voiceless. I feel as though my job, my goal, and my passion has always been to bring awareness in this area. And if I can impart or have an impact, if you will, with the people in our community, then yay. If it changes one life to see things differently, I've done some work here, and that's what I want to do. I want to continue the work, continue the effort in this area. So I'm happy to be a part of this panel today. But again, you know, I'm sitting with the experts, you know, I'm just giving my voice and my input, but I'm happy to be here.
Well, that is awesome. And I thank each of you for just kind of going through that warm up with us and just sharing. Folks, the work that the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force does is truly about providing ultimately education so that we can, each and every one of us can learn from each other, so that we ultimately can help mitigate unconscious bias, eliminate racism, and all forms of discrimination throughout our association and the industry we work. We want to grow and become more inclusive. And so with that said, I think it's time to include my brother from another mother and my colleague and board member from the Los Angeles Health Underwriters, our treasurer and secretary, Ross Pendergraph, who will has some questions of the panelists. Ross? It's time to unmute first. Welcome to live television.
There we go.
There we go.
Well, good morning, everyone. It really is a pleasure to be on this panel. It really is a focus, you know, ever since the George Floyd incident, I have been I've been very vocal out there in terms of we really need to make this part of what we're doing. That is with regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion. We just recently had a symposium, our annual symposium, about a month ago for our association. And we made it part of the symposium. We actually had a diversity panel, very similar to what we're having now, just to make sure that everyone is being made aware of this. And you know, one of the questions that came up is, how does diversity, equity, inclusion, how does that focus and strategy benefit your businesses? I think people need to understand that when businesses really focus in on this, really what happens is that you bring this to the forefront. And I think more businesses really need to do that. And people need to understand this really does help your business when you bring this to the forefront. Because what it does is it really makes people, really opens their eyes up to what's going on. And when they start to open their eyes, they begin to understand. I think when you hear what June was saying about her son when she was raising her sons, it's absolutely unbelievable that people that are white like me, they're absolutely in shock when they hear about, what do you mean you had to have a talk with your sons about how to go about in the community, how to interact with police officers? For white people like me, it's like, I don't know what the problem is. I see a police officer and, no problem, absolutely no problem. They're great, wonderful people. And Wayne was mentioning, Wayne's over there too. He's got the same problem. And, I have one of my assistants who's Latino, she tells me about this all the time, about how she, primarily her son, would get pulled over for no reason whatsoever. And we need to change that. And we need to understand that, people of color, whether black or brown, they're living in a different world than people like me. And we need to change that. We need to be inclusive. We need to understand that all people are born with these inalienable rights of, and that they should be able to live the same life that I'm living right now. So with that, we want to ask our panel some questions. And I don't know, do we have a particular question we wanted to start with, Wayne, or
Well, the question that comes to mind is often as we've learned, and we've been quick learners, oftentimes people probably need to understand how we would define diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those terms, what do they mean to each of the panelists? And maybe beyond just that definition, how we might apply those words within our industry and the world around us. Laurent, I'm going to have you go first, if you don't mind, and then I'll go over to June.
Sure. Thank you. For me, diversity, equity, inclusion, like it's been so watered down. I mean, it's one of those things where it may have started out as, we want to keep the workplace balance. We want everyone to have a say. But now it's just a buzzword for someone to come in, give a quick 1 hour workshop, and for the company to sort of check off a box and say, hey, you know what, we've done our part. There's nothing to see here. For me, I think that with diversity, obviously, everyone's represented, right? I mean, you have Black people, Latinx folks, Asian people, people of just all types of within different diasporas, indigenous folks, but also women, people who are LGBTQ, and also folks who have handicaps such as myself. But before the call, we were talking about how that I have a stutter, and so I think that those sort of handicaps kind of get lost. But for me, the thing about DEI that kind of gets a little, that people kind of lose the focus on, is that there needs to be people represented in the entire company. Because see, what happens is that, I'll take Google for example. I don't like to punch at them, but they're so easy to pick on, right? So Google has 2% Black folks, right? So what that tells me, that tells me two things. That says that they're not hiring Black people. Obviously, I mean 2%. That's fairly low. Now, mind you, Silicon Valley doesn't have a lot of Black people, but just the fact that they're not hiring Black people, that says a lot. And secondly, that says that Black people have seen that, and that tells us we are not welcome there. Because see, what happens, Wayne, is that let's say I work at Google, and just like what Aisha said, I experience microaggressions every single day. People are looking at my badge, seeing if I work there. I'm not being included. I'm the only person on the island. Or as Miss Taylor said, I'm the only chocolate drop there. So that tells other Black folks, well, why would I want to work there? So I think that when the way that we should think about DEI is that not only diversity, but also welcoming. That's the part that's missing. And when you have that welcoming, then you won't have so much churn. And for those who don't know what churn is, that's just basically like, you hire somebody and they quit or they get fired. So if you hire 50 black folks, but 45 of them leave, are you really making an impact?
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the response. Aisha, I'm going to ask you that same question. You know, just for our education, diversity, equity, and inclusion. How, from an industry perspective, if you will, how are those defined? And then some perspectives on how we might apply those within our industry, or things that you've seen that would be helpful to us.
Okay, and LaRon, thank you so much for that. Like, we're in church over here because I'm shaking my head like, yes, like, you know, because it's really, you kind of get tired, right? And it's just like, why do I have to? Could I just not be? Right? I just want to be. I'm not even asking you for anything. I'm gonna work. I'm gonna I'm gonna do everything I need to do. Can I just be? That's it. Could I just be? Could I just wear my braids? Could I just wear a little light lip? You know, could I just be? I'm not asking you to do anything to yourself. Just let me be, right? That's it. That's all anybody ever wants. Like, I
think I'm going to change that, Aisha. See behind me, it says, let it be. I think I'm
let
it, and it's going to say, let me be.
Let me be. That's it. You can have that, Wayne. You can have that. But, you know, I really appreciate just LaRon hitting a lot of points, and he talked about previously the belonging, and that just really resonated with me. Like, why would you want to come to a space? You can't pay me enough. I've literally resigned from keep your money. I will leave, right? Like, why would you want to make someone feel uncomfortable based on your own insecurities? And we really need to take a look at, you know, the bias piece. Like, are you biased? Classism, homophobia, oppression, the microaggressions piece. Are you marginalizing someone, right? Sexism. Do you have views, you know, that women shouldn't be in certain places? Like, men tell me all the time, well, oh, that must be hard for you being, you know, a woman being in the military. Like, sir, what are you talking about? You know what I'm saying? Have you even served in the military? Do you know? And it's based on their own biases, their traditionalism, the way they've been raised, the way society is. It's a man's world, right? And so there's so many things that naturally, I think, as humans, we don't even realize, right? As we're going through the day-to-day, right? We don't realize that are just a part of us. And I always just want to bring it back to the individual, right? Individually. And it's great that we're doing this grand thing. But as LaRon said, what's happening now is that this process is becoming a trend. It's becoming buzzwords. People are doing these cute little accessory pieces with it, just to say, oh, look at us. Look at what we're doing. We're about diversity. We're about equity. We're about inclusion. And then in actuality, under the layers, you're actually not. Superficially, you're speaking it, right? You're saying all the right things. Academically, you're having the great symposiums, you know, George Floyd. But let me tell you a piece that's really going to make people upset is that there have been a lot more Black men, women, and children killed by police prior to George Floyd. The history, it's there. And we're in the age of information. You can type in a little Google, okay? And if people are using Bing, that works too, right? But you can do a search and see what's going on. So the first piece that I want to share is that, you know, we have to first acknowledge, like, be honest and acknowledge what's happening. And again, internally, like, what are your own unconscious biases? Xenophobia, you know, of course we know racism, silencing. In some spaces, people who are non-white, we just go quiet. We are doing the best, especially in the Silicon Valleys or the, you know, any other corporate space or the Googles. We, being the sole Black person in those spaces is like literally we have to put on a face every day. We have to make sure that we are being in alignment with whatever the air quotes, and they say not to do air quotes in speaking, but whatever the agenda is, because we don't want to make you uncomfortable. Okay, we're the only Black person or the little sprinkle of pepper, or the only Asian person, or the only, you know, Latina person, or the only, you know, speckle of color, right, in the organization. And we don't want to mess that up because we want to see more of us. You know, we don't want diversity just in the language. We want like true diversity at the core. Do you value my thoughts? Do you see me as being valuable to you? I see Ross has a picture of the equality versus equity. Those are different pieces. People talk about equality, but in most cases we need equity, and that's going to look different depend on your organization and your background, right? So no more for equality, because this playing field hasn't been equal for years, about 465 or more, give or take, right? And so we want to be clear about that. And we really want to be honest. And, you know, I appreciate that you all put the word uncomfortable in this piece, because we are uncomfortable every single day. And we're not even doing anything. Can you imagine every single day not even wanting or having to be worried about whether or not your child is going to come back alive? Every day. It's in our face every single day. And they don't have to, oh, you know what? Now, let me straighten my son's hair, you know, because so their hair can look a little bit more slicker. Like, I think about those things as an African-American mom, as a Black mom, right? What can I do? And it's nothing. They're brilliant. But the world will never see that, right? And people will never see that because there's this conditioning, this mentality, if you will, of us being savages and criminals and all of these things. And why would you, that impacts how you operate in a healthcare system as well. Because if you feel like someone is less than, you're not going to give them quality service. You're not going to give them quality care. You're not going to see them as deserving, right? And that's even with your coworkers, right? And I always hear this thing that people say is, oh, you know, but I'm not racist because I have, you know, so many, you know, Black friends, or we just had, who do we have over for dinner? You know, and we got to stop that, right? Because that is not what racism is at all. It's really bigger than Black and white. Right. It's systemic, it's economic, right? It's so many layers to it. And guess what? Who owns America? We got to be clear about that, right? And so that's what I have to offer. Hopefully that, you know, clears some things up.
No, I definitely appreciate that. And I'm going to, and thank you. It's that passion as we shared.
Awesome.
And this thank you. This conversation is not for the weak of heart. June, how do you feel?
Listen, you know what? LaRon and Aisha have just been spot on. And honestly, I feel like I'm in church right now because they are preaching the word right now. But the thing that I want to say is that what I thought about immediately is, you know, how do we weave equity and inclusion into the fabric of our everyday lives? How do we do that? Because as LaRon was speaking on diversity, yeah, some people might say, well, you know, yeah, we have that down. We have diversity in our organization. Or like he's, you know, when he was saying, are we really welcome? Are we really? So, you know, but are we really getting the equity? To me, that's where, you know, we fall short. So many companies fall short in the equity and inclusion area. And Wayne, you know, I've shared this before. It's like, you know, I'm from the South, from Nashville, Tennessee. And I know when we have dinners, you know, for Thanksgiving, Christmas or whatever, the kids sat at the small table and the adults sat at the big table. It was the big table and the small table. And I was sharing with Wayne that, you know, oftentimes it's like, how do I get a seat at the table? You know, I know I don't need you to validate me. I've already earned the right to sit at the table, but oftentimes I don't get that opportunity. And it's hurtful. It makes you feel like you're not good enough. Like, what's wrong with me when we've done everything? I mean, we exceed, still we rise, but we just overachieve. We over everything to try to move to that next level. And that's where we fall short. And I agree with being uncomfortable, because so many people need to hear this. They need to hear what's being said, what LaRon is saying, what Aisha is saying. You know, we're going to do the work. That's not the problem. We don't mind doing the work. And I remember when I got into this industry, people would say to me, well, you're different. You're a different Black person. You're different. And I would often say, no, I'm not. There's so many millions of Black people like me who are bright, smart, went to school, know their stuff, but just haven't had the opportunity. And so that's where we're lacking. I do think, I have to agree. I think when we think about equity and inclusion, we fall short in that area. And it's trying to move that along and get that messaging out, Wayne. I think it's just so important to get that messaging out, is because we can talk about, like Aisha said, you have people who can, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and can talk about all this talk. But you know what? I've grew up with the saying, action speaks louder than words. You can talk the talk, but you got to do the walking. You got to talk and do the walking as well. So that's all I have to say.
No, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I'm going to kind of ask, I'm going to ask Ross a question, then I'm going to swing it through the whole audience, through the whole panelists again. But, we were talking about this a little earlier, the top women benefit advisors, according to the July-August issue of Employee Benefit Advisor. And my question is a little bit tied to this because, and it's probably going to provoke some response, but that's what get uncomfortable, folks, because that's what this is about. I was noticing as I went through this fine colleagues that I've had the opportunity to know and things, but unfortunately, I didn't see a lot of folks of women of color. I didn't see a lot of diversity. I don't know if that's because of inclusion. I don't know why. But one question I wanted you to start off with, Ross, is people sometimes say, well, I don't see color. Well, I got to tell you, for me, when I look through this, as much as it's awesome, colleagues, one of the things I do see is an absence of color. Ross, how do you respond when people ask you as an industry professional, or say to you, I don't see color? How do you respond to that? And then I'll go through the panelists as well.
Well, for me, when people say I don't see color, most likely I think they're lying. That would be almost like saying, oh, I don't see gender. No, I think everybody sees color. I think it's a matter of whether or not you choose to recognize the fact that we're living in a world where we're not recognizing it. And that's, and what's really interesting, it really also depends on the geographical area in which you live in. I live in Southern California, and when you look at, as an example, our board of directors, it would be very difficult to say that we're not diverse. I mean, we are diverse, but we got put on the national task force for our National Association of Health Underwriters for this diversity, equity, and inclusion. And when we talk to people back east, as an example, wow, they do have a problem. They are not diverse back east, and it's really unfortunate. But the other thing I like to mention, in my opinion, it boils down to education. We need to be much more proactive when it comes to educating. When you think back, when I think back, I think I might be the oldest person on this panel, but when I think back to my education, and this is what we're hearing more and more about, we weren't taught about slavery in our schools. The only thing we were taught is Abraham Lincoln came up with this Emancipation Proclamation. We had a Civil War, and poof, that was the end of slavery. So slavery, right? No, it was the furthest thing from the end of slavery. We had Jim Crow laws that were really with us all the way up to the 60s. And Jim Crow laws, is, if you aren't familiar, was just another form of racism, excluding blacks from everything that we were doing. So back to the question, do people see color? I think we need to educate people more. We need to educate people more on what it really means. So I hope that kind of answers your question.
Thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. And for all our colleagues back east, East is a really big place. So I know there are diverse places throughout the East as well. Maybe just not Los Angeles. We pride ourselves on being extraordinarily diverse. LaRon, when you're asked, or I've heard somebody say, you know, I just don't see color. How have you typically responded to that?
Well, you know, I mean, I think that's fallacy. I mean, I think that when people say I don't see color, that just essentially means I don't want to see color. See, here's the thing. There was a poem that a young Asian woman did. I'll never forget it. She was talking with a friend of hers, and her friend, white person, was like, well, you know, I don't see color. I just see you as you. And what she had said is that I want you to see my color. When I look at Aisha, right, you know, I see her, I see her first as being black. I'm a race first guy because again, I think that is the most impactful quality in anyone's life. However, I see her as a black woman, so she's gonna have certain challenges that I'm not gonna have. I mean, it's just like well, like I used to always you know, joke and be like, well, you know, haha, women can go to the restroom by themselves. But it wasn't until I learned, as Ross said, the reason why women go to the restrooms impact is it's because of scary people, what they call them, men. So, but coming back to the colorblind, when you say you don't see my color, that means you're not going to acknowledge everything that I went through, everything that I'm going through, and everything that I will go through. By seeing my color, that means that you are viewing life realistically. You're realizing that, you know, as a black man, I am underrepresented in the job market. I'm underrepresented in the university, not only as a student, but as a facilitator, as an instructor. I'm more likely to be shot by the police. I'm the biggest population of people incarcerated. You know, for every 100,000 people incarcerated in the United States, 8,000 of them are black men. That's a significant number, Wayne, because the reason why that I say that is that there are more black men incarcerated in America than there are women all around the world, right? So when you say you don't see my color, that means that you're refusing to see my light. Look, in a very just and honest society, we could say that everything is built and gained on meritocracy, but this country has never been built. The inception of this country, the genocide of the indigenous folks, using black people as labor. There's no meritocracy in America makes as much sense as oil and water. It doesn't exist. So when you say, oh, I don't see color, that's because you don't want to see it. Listen, race is a very touchy subject. I mean, not for me, probably not for Aisha, not for June, because, you know, society's made race out in front. But when you say you don't see color, you're just not wanting to deal with reality. And when someone says that to me, we really don't have a lot to talk about, because I don't believe in the boogeyman. I don't believe in the tooth fairy. So when you say I don't see color, you're basically believing in stuff that doesn't exist.
Thank you so much, LaRon, and I appreciate it. And it's one of those areas that we struggle with, because I guess we want to feel like we don't see color, and then we don't as we reflect upon ourselves. But Aisha, when you've been asked that question, how would you respond, and how have you help us learn to become better?
Woo! LaRon, thank you so much. Listen, I had a conversation with a white lady, and I do my best to create the space for all people to be included. Like that's just ultimately who I am. You know, I make sure that I'm aware, that I'm focused, and I am giving you my undivided attention, whoever you are, children too, right? And it's so funny how June mentioned earlier about, you know, because I'm Southern as well. So, you know, how the children from a child, like children and adults, you know, if you're a child, you can't sit at the table with adults. You can't come in the room with adults. As a matter of fact, if you're a child, don't touch my refrigerator, right? You know, and so there were certain things like from children, certain behaviors, right? Certain practices that we've been conditioned to believe, right? Along the way, and I just want to bring that up, and so it brings me to a conversation that I had with this one white lady, and like I said, we were friends, right? I have a conversation with anybody, people I don't know if I have the face or whatever, people just start telling me their whole life story. And so basically she was just, you know, telling me, you know, she believes in the universe and all these things. And she was telling me that she's a Black woman too. And I was like, well, wait, because you're not, you know, because like, as I, you know, this doesn't wash off. Okay. This is not something I get on and put on every day. Okay. This is not a book that I read. This is not something that I make up, you know. This is who I am every single day. So I don't even, the privilege of anyone to even say, oh, you know, I don't, like, that's a privilege within itself. I don't see color. What? So then maybe you're colorblind, and tell that to a person who actually is colorblind and cannot see color. You see, but there's a certain privilege that comes with that. Like how can you have, that's a power to make somebody be invisible. Like, I'm not even going to acknowledge you because you're not even worth me acknowledging who you are. So I don't see you. You know, like, come on, like, what? You don't know who I am, you know, like, you know, and then it makes you have to want to like read your resume, right? Like, let me get you together. That's why if you all see my social media, it's not much you'll find on there. Okay. I first of all, I don't even have the time to manage it, right, in my real life. And so I don't, you know, often have times to post, you know, certain things and to always talk about, you know, what it is that I'm doing, you know, because I don't want people to feel like they have to prove anything. Again, I want people to be their authentic selves, right? Come into a space where we can be authentic and we create the space for us to truly grow. And, you know, with that question, I just want to throw it back at people and what I offer to anyone, whoever gets met with that question. And it may not be in that particular, you know, form, but why would you not want to see color? Why would you not want to? What does that say about you? Or what are you making that mean? I don't see color. That's the weirdest thing. But yeah, thank you.
No, thank you. I was thinking of one of my favorite paintings by Vincent van Gogh, Starry, Starry Night, and how boring it would be if I didn't see those colors.
Exactly.
But June, anything you'd like to add to that, June, and how you've responded in your role?
Well, you know what? I have to agree with LaRon. When people say they don't see color, it's just not true. You do. You know what? There was you know, and I'm giving a plug for this, but there's a documentary on skin on Netflix right now. And when you think about color, I can't tell you the millions of African Americans and Africans who are using lightning screen to change their color so that they can be recognized, so that they can move up the ladder, if you will, looking for that acknowledgement or that recognition, or being able to have the opportunity to be able to advance in their different various careers. So yes, color, when people say they don't see color, yes, they do. They see color. I'm sorry, I'm with LaRon on that. That's a hard one to believe, because you notice it immediately. And as a person of color, I do notice it, because you know what, if I'm in a room full of African American people and there's a white person in the room, immediately I'm going to notice that, and I'm going to want to engage that person to make sure they're comfortable, they feel okay, whatever the case may be. So I think that you know, again, once again, it's that awareness of like, what are we thinking when we say that? And I think, and again, you know, it's just like a colleague said to me, just imagine if you had a box of crayons, but you could only use one crayon out of the box. How boring would the pictures be if they're all the same color? You know what I mean? So you're happy that you have that full box because you can create so much. So even though we have our differences, we also have our similarities. And so I think that, again, that's a very good question, Wayne. And I think it's thought provoking where people need to step back and really ponder on that. It's like, are you really not color? Because so many decisions are made, like you said, when we get back to that unconscious bias, so many decisions are made, and some of the variables that come in is color. You know, am I going to pick this lighter skinned Black person over this darker skinned Black person or over this white person? And they all have the same credentials. They all have the same, or this Black person has better credentials, but then I think this person looks better, or they're prettier, or they're lighter. Am I making a decision off of that? So that, and the reality is, does that happen? Yes, it happens all the time.
And you know, and I thank you for that, June. This is a, you know, to all our Medicare colleagues out there, and this is a statewide Medicare conference, and being in the Medicare space as you all are, one thing, as you know, when we do our AHIP training and testing, we cannot discriminate. It's part of our compliance testing through AHIP, as well as the carriers we represent, and there is no discrimination of any shape, way, shape, or form in multiple areas, and that's been expanded, as you all know. And so I would ask you to think about unconscious biases that you may currently have, where hopefully they become a little bit more conscious in our decision making, and those, as we're trying to reach out to the communities that we serve. They're so diverse here within the state of California, and quite frankly, we need all the crayons in order to color in and to serve the communities throughout California. This is going to be kind of a lightning round question to everybody. And so I'm going to ask you to do it in perhaps 30 seconds or less. But any favorite books or literature that you, or websites that you would guide us, in addition to your own, that you would lead us to right now to help us keep learning? Any favorite reads or things that have struck you as something you would share with the audience? I'm going to kind of go in the reverse order first and to kick it over to Aisha. And then I'm going to kind of go back around. And so Aisha, LaRon, Ross, and then June. Aisha?
I'm ready. Okay, so of course I have some resources for you all. Because I'm heavily focused in the education space with teaching these workshops on diversity, inclusion, and equity, right? My basis is more, you know, in the education. 10 minutes left. Okay, so I want to give you the culturally responsive teaching and the brain, promoting authentic engagement and rigor among culturally and linguistically diverse students, Zaretta Hammond. And the reason why I want to share this book is because—
Go ahead and hold that up again, because that was a long title.
Yeah, I know, right? I apologize.
Okay. There you go. We'll get a snap of that.
You got it, right? But this is really important because it doesn't just focus on education, but focuses on the neuroscience behind it. And so that's something that everybody can relate to. And then you could break it out based on your industry specific needs or whatever the case may be. So start with that first. Start with, how does the brain work naturally? For all those people out there that don't have, or feel like they don't have, unconscious biases, please know that you do, because you're human. Thank you.
LaRon, unmute, and there you go.
Any books? Well, for me, I mean, like
resources.
Well, first off, you can go to my site, www.laronbarton.com. As I said, I have a lot of essays about race. I also give talks, so plenty of my talks are there. For me, books, everything starts with the autobiography of Malcolm X. I think that's the most influential book I've read. I mean, it changed my life. I mean, partly the way that I think is because of that. Also, a book called The Man Not by Dr. Tommy Curry, it talks about how we're unable to see Black men as being victims, and also I think Teen Vogue writes a lot. I mean, like, they publish a lot of great articles about race, especially they put a lot of young Black women authors on, and I mean, personally, I would love to write for them. I think they're fantastic. So, yeah.
Awesome. And what is your website again, Leron?
It's www.leronbarton.com. That's LeronBarton.com.
Awesome. Super awesome. Ross, anything that you've read that you felt helped you in this subject and that you'd share with the audience?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I think education is extremely important. And, you know, it never really occurred to me until I read this book. It's called The Color of Law. You can basically pick it. I got this off of Amazon. And the biggest point I wanted to make about this book is you oftentimes wonder, you know, why do we have communities that are predominantly all Black? You know, what brought that about? Well, the reality is it was our legislators that created, really through systemic racism, basically making sure that people of color did not integrate with white people in communities. And that's really a big problem. You don't probably see it as much today, but if you start reading the history, you'll see that our legislators really made sure that white people and Black people were not integrated in terms of communities. And I think people need to understand how that happened and why it happened. And the book, The Color of Law, will essentially educate you on exactly how that happened.
Thank you, Ross. I appreciate that. June, any resources or favorite reads that you'd share with the audience?
Okay, sure. You know, I would again say, you know, go to Google. There's so much out there right now that you can get so much information. There's just so many resources out there. But right now I'm reading a book called Begin Again. I don't know if you got, oh, you probably can't see it. It's James Baldwin's America and Its Urgent Lessons for Our Own by Eddie Glaude Jr. And so I would just say, I mean, this is a great, I mean, if you know anything about James Baldwin, he was before his time, had a lot of good things to say. But and this book is relevant to today, what the lessons that we can learn right now in this time. So I would just say, you know, there's so much information out there. LeRon made suggestion, Aisha made some suggestions. Start there. Let that be a beginning for you in this, for, you know, learning more about this space.
Thank you so much. Well, everybody, feel free to unmute because we are coming into that final 2-minute countdown. And of the California Association of Health Underwriters and all of our Medicare participants, colleagues in industry, colleagues, I just want to thank each and every one of you, our co-chairs, June and Ross, LeRon, Aisha, all of you, for joining us. The work that you do is very, very important. We truly welcome the extra thoughts, the new thought processes, and we're really blessed to have had you join us today. Any final word before we go, starting with, I'll let Aisha and LeRon go first, and Aisha, closing thought, 10 seconds, 15 seconds.
Okay, I'm gonna just leave a quote. Entitled people exude a delusional degree of self-confidence. But the problem with entitlement is that it makes people need to feel good about themselves all the time, even at the expense of those around them. Mark Manson.
Thank you.
That was awesome. I would say continue to educate yourself. You know, if you see or hear something that could be that could be considered discriminatory, offensive, call it out. Because if you don't call it out, then that says that you accept it. That tells the person who was being offensive it's okay, and it tells the person who was offended that's how things are. So
thank you.
Loved it. That was awesome.
June?
And I would just say to our agents, our fellow brokers and producers, think about those communities that you serve and giving back to those communities, getting a better understanding, be able to share, learn from what you've got today, expand on that learning so that you can give back to your communities that you serve every day.
Thank you, my friend. Ross, bringing us home.
Okay, so I think everyone knows I'm a huge fan of Martin Luther King, and now more recently another gentleman by the name of John Lewis. And I love what John Lewis said, and I'll just say, quote, "When you see something that is not right, not fair, not just, you have a moral obligation, a mission, and a mandate to stand up, to speak up, and speak out, and get in the way, get in trouble. Good trouble, necessary trouble." And that's from John Lewis.
Thank you, my
Very
friend.
good.
God bless each and every one of you. And thank you for those who have tuned in. On behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force, we thank you and are honored to have been of service. Wish you a beautiful day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for your time.
Yes, thank you so much, you guys. Have a
Thank
blessed day.
you.
Smile for
All right,
one
take care.
Y'all,
Take care.
y'all take care.
All right.